impromptu edition of FightSaga Radio. Guys, I'll be your host, Joseph Herron, ring announcer, fight scribe, boxing writer. And you're going to hear right now the uncensored rant by yours truly. You'll be able to read the censored edition on FightSaga.com tomorrow morning. But right now I have a lot to get off my chest. A lot of things happening in the news lately. And guys, before I go any further, this episode is sponsored by FightSaga.com. Guys, for all the latest boxing news, please visit FightSaga.com. Now, customarily, I'm usually joined by fight scribe Rodney Green, 5-decade fight trainer James Gogi, or editor-in-chief of FightSaga.com, Mr. Lee Cleveland, or even my brother Brian Dantzler from Royalty Boxing Talk. But today it's just going to be me. And I am absolutely sickened with some of the delusional crap that's being presented to all of you boxing fans on YouTube. It's nothing but delusional rubbish, to the point where even these fighters are starting to believe it. The latest delusional rant was from Keith, one-time Thurman, who went on Instagram yesterday or the day before yesterday. And he had this to say, right? This is going to be the uncensored version, right? This is what he had to say. Quote, F Bob Arum. Why you talking shit, Bob? Keep your damn mouth shut, Bob. You want a cheap-ass fight? I'll punch in your shit for free. How about that? That's the only cheap-ass shit you're going to get out of me. I'll give you a free lick, boy, end quote. Now, keep in mind, this is a disgruntled former commodity of PBC who isn't worth a shit now, who's threatening to lay hands on an 89-year-old Hall of Fame promoter. This is coming from a semi-retired, often injured former commodity of boxing. He goes on to say this, quote, look, man, I'm going to snap on Bob real quick. Bob, you're a piece of shit. You're one of the worst effing promoters in the game. All your great fighters left your ass. Oscar De La Hoya left your ass. Floyd Mayweather left your ass. Manny Pacquiao left your ass. Crawford, he about to leave your ass. Bob, you know what's up. You know I never asked for anything. It ain't my fault you can't afford a great fight. You cheap as shit. You can barely pay your own fighters good money. That ain't my fault. You got ESPN backing you. You got Terrence Crawford, one of the most talented fighters in the welterweight division, and you can't get him paid. You can't make him famous enough, end quote. This is a Hall of Fame promoter who's been doing this longer than you've been alive, Keith. And he's in the process right now. He's already secured a location for the biggest money fight in boxing, which doesn't include you. It's between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. He's brokering 2 fights right now to take place in 2021, which is going to earn his fighter close to $100 million over 2 fights. That doesn't sound like someone who's, quote, cheap as shit, end quote. He just understands the market and understands who's a market commodity in 2021. To be fair, Keith Thurman at one point in time was PBC's biggest earning and highest ratings draw, right? That was 4 or 5 years ago when PBC was just starting up. You're talking about Bob Arum being one of the worst promoters in boxing? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob Arum didn't squander over $300 million of hedge fund investor money. He's not the one who squandered over $300 million of investor money. And guys, Al Heyman still has to answer for that. Al Heyman still has to answer for that. And he will in court within the next year or so. Now think about this. If Al Heyman actually had the wherewithal to invest those hundreds of millions of dollars in the PBC streaming fight service, rather than blindly spending millions of dollars on time purchases with no infrastructure in place to secure corporate sponsorship, we wouldn't be having this dilemma, and he wouldn't have to depend on the bankroll of Fox or Showtime Sports. So Keith Thurman, what you're hearing is, well, a disgruntled fighter who is no longer in a bare boxing market, in a bare pay-per-view market. He is no longer the commodity that he used to be. The days of the inflated purses are long gone, brother. Sorry, but that's the reality. Now, yeah, Bob Arum is the only promoter to admit that, yeah, he loses money with his biggest stars in 2020. But he's the only promoter without the filter that's going to admit it, but every promoter lost money in 2020. Bob Arum's the only one with the stones to admit it. Now, to his defense, when he signed Terrence Crawford to that contract extension, guaranteeing him $4 million per fight, well, he banked on the idea that he'd be able to, well, at least land one of the biggest welterweight fights in the world right now, at least one of the two, Terrence Crawford opposite either Errol Spence Jr. or Manny Pacquiao. No one foresaw the pandemic coming. So Keith One-Time Thurman, well, at least now we know what one time stands for. It stands for one time he was a commodity in boxing, not anymore. Let's look at how he landed that fight opposite Manny Pacquiao. One, Manny Pacquiao saw that as a very winnable fight. Two, Keith Thurman had something that he wanted, the Super WBA Welterweight Championship. He doesn't have that anymore. So what are you worth, Keith? You're not a huge ratings draw anymore. You're nothing. You're a semi-retired fighter who's often injured, a lot more often than he is active. So Bob Arum, when he states, no, you know what, Crawford versus Thurman, that's not a pay-per-view fight. And unfortunately, if I want to pay what Keith Thurman thinks he deserves, an inflated purse, it's going to have to be presented on the pay-per-view additional revenue platform to pay for those outlandish inflated purses. And he's right on the money. Unfortunately, he's locked himself to guaranteeing Terrence Crawford $4 million, which means there's very little money to play with in terms of paying for his opposition. Hey, if you're worth that much and you're still that much of a commodity, I don't see your promoter actually wanting to bankroll your fights. Obviously, your promoter can't afford you either, brother, anymore, or else why would you even be entertaining the idea of fighting on ESPN on a top-ranked card with Terrence Crawford? Because no one wants to pay your inflated purses any longer. You're not worth it. You're not worth it. You're not a ratings draw any longer. You're not a pay-per-view commodity. The only reason why you see these inflated fighters' purses presented on pay-per-view, either via Showtime pay-per-view or Fox pay-per-view, any longer, is because it's necessary. It's done out of necessity to pay for these inflated fighters' purses. But are they pay-per-view matchups? No. You look at the Charlo bill. No, that wasn't supposed to be on pay-per-view. But that's the only way he could guarantee his fighters' purses, is if it were accompanied by the added revenue stream of pay-per-view. It's done out of necessity, brother. Wake up and learn something about the business of boxing. Okay? Because you don't know shit, Keith. You're still living in the past. You think you're still a major draw in this sport. You don't have a huge fan base. You don't have a major world title around your waist. And you haven't been active long enough to gain any new fans. You're living in the past, brother. Can Manny Pacquiao, who's a bigger draw than you, can he demand 7 figures for his next fight? No. He can't live on the past of what he's done. He can't lobby to get a huge purse based on the Floyd Mayweather numbers that he did 5 years ago. Doesn't work like that, brother. How are your ratings for Josecito Lopez? How were they? You were guaranteed $2.5 million to fight someone like Manny Pacquiao, when Manny was guaranteed $10 million. And now you want more than that to face Terrence Crawford. You are out of your mind and you're living in fantasy land. Here's another fighter who's living in fantasy land. We're gonna move now. We're gonna move to Deontay Wilder. Oh, woe is me. Guys, anyone who's listened to the show, we've been very consistent. We told you what was going to happen. The mediation was nothing. It was a last-ditch effort to try to come to an agreement. But we told you that when guys agree to fight, it's a business relationship. It's a partnership. And what was going to be the result of Deontay Wilder getting this rubbish from his delusional fans, feeding his head full of a bunch of nonsense, slandering Tyson Fury publicly? What was going to be the result of that? Well, obviously, Tyson Fury had this to say during mediation. He even stated this before mediation. He said, look, Bob Arum had this to say. Tyson Fury has said to me and the mediator, not today, not tomorrow, not ever will he ever fight Wilder after what Deontay Wilder said to him. He regards as not only as a slur against him, but against the entire Gypsy Nation. End quote. We told you guys that was going to happen. So he wants to talk about honoring a contract. Deontay Wilder knows nothing about honor and acting honorably. Dude, you got your ass whooped. Face it. Move on. Issue a formal apology. And then maybe you might get that fight somewhere down the road. But, dude, you need therapy. You don't need another shot at the title. You don't need to get your head slammed in by a right hand again. You need therapy, brother, and so do your delusional fans. Now, I'm going to share this with you guys because it was absolutely appalling. I don't remember what podcast it was on, Barbershop Racism Podcast or something like that. But they featured my friend Javen Sugar Hill Stewart on there. Now, I'm going to tell you what kind of gentleman Javen Sugar Hill is, right? 7 years ago, when I used to host the Pugilist Corner, and it was featured exclusively on the old Eastside Boxing, which is now Boxing News 24, I hosted that show and interviewed fighters, trainers, promoters every Wednesday night for several years. 7 years ago, my father passed away, and it was a show scheduled at the same time as my dad's rosary and his open casket, right? And so I reached out to Javen, as well as his friend and the always honorable Dimitri Salita. And they said, no problem, Joseph, we've got you. We'll host the show for you because we know that you've already booked this. We'll go on and we'll host the show for 2 hours for you because you've always been good to us, and my Uncle Emmanuel really liked you. And so they did, and I was able to go pay my last respects to my father. I will never forget that as long as I live. And that's what a good, honorable man Javen Sugar Hill Stewart is. And how was he treated when he came on this farce of a podcast? He was called Uncle Tom. He was called a discredit to his race. He was treated absolutely just miserably. He was insulted. And this is one of the best guys that you'll ever meet in the sport. I'll say this. He's lucky he's a lot more mild-mannered than his late, great Uncle Emmanuel, because Emmanuel would have, if he were treated like that, Emmanuel would have laid into you guys and said, shame on you. You guys are acting like a bunch of delusional, sore losers, making this into a race issue. How dare you guys? Because when you make something this nonsensical into a race issue and you try to throw race into this, it marginalizes all of the serious issues that the black American community actually faces. It marginalizes the serious issues. Throwing the race card into this nonsense. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. It's disgusting is what it is. So congratulations, Wilder fans. What you guys just did is filled your favorite fighter's head full of a bunch of nonsense where you espouse all kinds of rubbish publicly, dramatically deflating his stock, talking him out of another multi-million-dollar payday. Congratulations, guys, because it's nothing but nonsense. Challenging the integrity of a really good guy like Javen Sugar Hill Stewart. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. Bringing up Louis Resto and Billy Collins with Panama Lewis tragedy back in 1983. Well, do you remember what happened with that, guys? Do you remember? Go back and look at your history. If you're going to be bold enough to throw out that claim, let's take a look at what happened. Now, based on the evidence that they did have, they realized that it far exceeded the jurisdiction of the New York State Athletic Commission and the WBC, and they filed criminal charges. So, guys, if you have any legit proof, like you say you do, file criminal charges because that's what you're accusing Tyson Fury of doing. Criminal activity. Go to the police. Let's see what they say about your proof, about your evidence. Do you remember what happened when Louis Resto and Panama Lewis were taken to court and found guilty? They served jail time, guys. So if you have proof, take it to the authorities. You guys shouldn't be seeking another multi-million-dollar payday, another fight. You guys should be seeking justice then in the court of law. But you guys can't because you guys are all delusional trolls. You should be ashamed of yourselves. It's nonsense. You want to bring up Louis Resto and Billy Collins. You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. It's nonsense. Deontay Wilder, what is he going to do now? As far as his stock has fallen, is anyone going to pay to see him on pay-per-view after this? Who's he going to fight? Does a guy like Tyson Fury need him to make money? Obviously not. There's a greater demand to see him fight Anthony Joshua. The only people who are interested in seeing a third fight with Tyson Fury are delusional fans who are still crying about the second fight. Face it, guys. Your favorite fighter got his ass whooped. End of story. Trying to say that good men like Javen Sugar Hill, Mark Breland, Kenny Bayless were in on it. His water was tampered with. Get the F out of here. You guys sound, oh my gosh, delusional. And it's terrible for the sport. You guys should all be certified, locked up. You guys need therapy. But this is what happens when you start believing this kind of rubbish. Deontay Wilder could have easily been working with a good trainer like Javen Sugar Hill Stewart had he just reached out to him and made the call. Tyson Fury is the one with the sense to hire Javen Sugar Hill and said, hey, man, I need to win this. Come up with a strategy that we can win this. And guess what? He said, okay, I'll do it because it was a job. That's what he does. He trains fighters, puts them in a position to win. Should have called up Ronnie Shields. You would have been happy to work with Deontay Wilder. But no, that would actually take getting someone in camp who's going to give it to you straight, not going to sugarcoat anything, not going to make any excuses about tempered water or some kind of throwing in the towel or being in on the fix. or some bullshit egg weight in your glove. It's nonsense. You guys should all be ashamed of yourselves. So what you give is what you get, which is nothing now. Deontay Wilder gets nothing. Tyson Fury doesn't need him to make millions. Where does Deontay Wilder go from here? Well, you know what? The guy needs therapy, and he should be happy with a simple tune-up, because that's what he needs. He doesn't need any further damage and punches to the head. You guys should all be ashamed of yourselves because of how a good man like Javen Sugar Hill Stewart was treated on that racist podcast. It's nonsense. So anyway, so guys, for your two delusional prize fighters and their fans, you get the War Week round of applause. Thank you for actually adding comedy to This Week in Boxing. Keith One-Time Thurman, Chingao. Brother, you are not the big commodity that you think you are. Talk to your promoter. Ask him about what your realistic market value is now. 4 or 5 years ago, you may have been something, but not anymore. Don't blame it on Bob Arum. He understands the market value. Apparently, he has no problem getting millions of dollars for a matchup that actually has demand, has some legs underneath it. Does anyone want to see anyone versus Keith One-Time Thurman right now? Not for the kind of purses that you're expecting to make. So, guys, if you missed any part of this show, go ahead and listen to it on our YouTube platform, Warweek Radio Network on YouTube. But, guys, otherwise, you can hear us once again this Sunday night, a preview of the big Showtime triple header coming up on the 23rd. This Sunday, Coach Gogi will be breaking it down, analyzing all the matchups, talking about what a superb main event this is in the 122-pound weight division. That's going to just about do it. Guys, leave your comments in the comment section. Don't be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Warweek Radio Network. Happy Friday, everybody. On behalf of everyone here at Warweek Radio Network, my name is Joseph Herron, fight scribe, ring announcer. Have a great weekend, everybody.